Hey, what are you doing here? Long time no see. Are you here also for the event? The Asia Berlin event? Yes, okay, me too. Let me show you something. We are here on Potsdamer Platz, Potsdamer Square in the center of Berlin, a very historical place. After the war, this was completely bombed and empty and no man's land with a border here crossing and dividing the east from the west of Berlin. Meanwhile, somewhat 30 years later, you see it's a vibrant place at this heart of Berlin with modern buildings. A lot of tourists are coming if there is not a pandemic taking place. Yes, and we want to give you a bit the spirit of how Berlin looks and how Berlin feels before we start our event officially. In the 1920s, the golden 20s, Potsdamer Platz was the place to be. Berlin's high society was enjoying themselves in bars, restaurants, and luxury hotels. The only old piece that you can still see is this building over there. That is all that was left after the Second World War when everything was flat bombed here. Meanwhile, all the buildings are new, modern buildings. And again, it became an attractor for a lot of tourists if tourists are allowed into the town. But now I have to run to the office in order to start the event. So see you in a bit. Good morning, Europe, and good afternoon, Asia. Welcome to our third Asia Berlin event this year. My name is Jan Lachenmeier. I am one of the managing directors of enpact, and I will be your host today. This Asia Berlin event is about Empower. It's about innovation trends from Asia, and we have a look into Jakarta, Bangalore, and Singapore, and to look into the startup ecosystems and the innovation trends out of the startup ecosystems. We have fantastic speakers, and we will add to this some numbers because we assessed the entrepreneurial ecosystems of those three cities, and we will give you some insights. So, what is Asia Berlin? Asia Berlin is an initiative by the Berlin Center Department for Economics, Technology, and Public Enterprises, and we as enpact are one of the main implementing partners. And this event today is co-organized by REDHILL with their headquarters in Singapore, and without them it would have been impossible. So, what will we talk about today? It's about innovation trends, and it's about the surrounding conditions that make innovation trends possible, that make startups and startup growth possible. And for this, with enpact, we developed a startup friendliness index. So essentially, enpact works in empowering entrepreneurs and empowering startups. That's our mission. And when doing so, we realized it needs more. It needs the surrounding. It needs the conditions that actually empower not just one, two startups, but empower many, many startups. And those conditions is what we call the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And it depends on a lot of different components, and that's why we looked into what is called the relational theory of entrepreneurial ecosystems. And in an essence, it says that different elements are important for startups, entrepreneurs, businesses to become successful or to become more likely successful and have less challenges. And these conditions are what we call in our Startup Friendliness Index domains. And we have 6 domains here, ranging from human capital, which is all about the access to talent, to finance, of course, financing a venture, a business. Then the startup scene, how to get knowledge, what is the status of the startup scene, the infrastructure, such as office space, speed of internet, but also connectivity, roads, air connectivities. And then we have the macro political framework conditions. How is the law? How fast can someone incorporate a business? How democratically stable is a system? And the last domain, the sixth one, is the market domain, which is kind of like the bigger economy in which the city startup ecosystem is embedded. Now, these 6 domains together are fueled with a lot of data. We have more than 90 indicators for this. So we categorize them in indicators. They fuel into subdomains. We have 17 subdomains into the 6 domains. And then out of this, we derive one number, which is kind of like our approach to make startup ecosystems, cities across countries comparable. Now, how does that exactly work? How can you compare apples with pears? So we do this by normalizing the data. So that means whenever we have an indicator, we look into the cities that we assessed, and we assessed 58 cities in emerging and developing countries. And in each of those indicators, we look who scores the highest and who scores the lowest. As in, for example, if you're talking about numbers of startups, who has the highest numbers of startups in comparison to the population scores the highest and therefore gets 100. And the city or the city startup ecosystem who scores the lowest has the lowest number in comparison to citizens scores 0. So therefore, all indicators are what we call normalized, scoring between 100, 0 to 100, while 100 is good and 0 is not so good. So now looking into Singapore, Bangalore, and Jakarta, we see all of these ecosystems are innovative in their ways. All have strengths and have weaknesses, and interestingly enough, they are complementary. So some have more capital, such as Singapore. Others need investments, such as Jakarta. Or who has the entrepreneurs? There's a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs and an entrepreneurial spirit in Bangalore as well as in Jakarta. And we see in our numbers that Singapore is a bit slower on that side. So it's not so much essentially about competition. It is often also about who has strengths, who has weaknesses, and how do we collaborate to make win-win situations out of this. So let's dive into our first city, Bengaluru. And we have a short introduction to the Bangalore startup ecosystem by my colleague Amrita from Bengaluru.
Hello everybody, I'm Amrita Gandikota, Hub Manager of Asia Berlin in India. I think you'll all agree with me when I say scalability, cost efficiency, and business agility are crucial for startups. Now, why should Bangalore, the Silicon Valley of India, be your next business destination? India is the 3rd largest startup ecosystem, which boasts of over 32 unicorns and a strong and trusted network of government agencies, institutional investors, corporate accelerators clustered in Bangalore, the leading startup hub in India. So I welcome you all to experience Bangalore as an innovation hub, which offers you a great market for scale with talent and resources at an optimized cost, and most importantly, an open market to set up, collaborate, and co-create.
And on our Startup Friendliness Index, it scores a 40.8 out of 100, which is fairly good. Bangalore is a tech hub since centuries. There are a lot of tech founders and a big pool of tech talent coming out of Bangalore. And what struck us when we assessed the data is they really have the entrepreneurial spark, the entrepreneurial mindset. So we have an indicator called entrepreneurship as a career path, and they score the best across all 58 cities. So they score 100. And also, if you look at the numbers of startups, they score the highest, they have a full 100. So if we're talking about entrepreneurial spirit, startup spirit, Bangalore is the place. But then, of course, there are also challenges. One challenge that we identified is access to funding. If you look into the pre-seed and seed funding numbers, Bangalore scores a 16 out of 100. And if you look into total VCs and private investors, Bangalore scores a 12. So there are some challenges on that side. And therefore, I'm very happy to talk directly to one of the founders in Bangalore. It's Ayushi. And she's the co-founder of Drona Maps. So I'm very glad to hear like women power here, female power as an entrepreneur in a male-dominated sphere and in a very technical field. So Drona Maps is using drones to create 3D maps of remote areas. Very fascinating. Ayushi, tell us a bit more about Drona Maps.
Thank you so much, Jan, for the introduction. So Drona Maps is basically a command and control center solution that uses 3D maps as its backbone and integrates existing geospatial data with sensors, drone live feeds, and every other sort of data input that is coming from the ground. So that's what we were doing. And I guess in answer to your question specifically about access to funding, I think it's true that pre-seed is fairly hard. Like idea stage is almost non-existent. Pre-seed is relatively harder to find, in terms of, except of course, like if you are actually in touch with an already existing educational institution, and then it becomes easier. So the ecosystems also have particular hotbeds where it is easy access. Then of course, like the timelines don't always follow the same timeline as your Silicon Valley startups. Having said that, like if you have taken your company to $1 million in revenue and have established efficacy, at that point of time there is significant amount of funding and the ecosystem is matured enough to be able to support that.
So Ayushi, if you have a recommendation to early stage founders at this early phase, what advice would you give them?
I would tell them to actually quickly iterate based on with as minimal risk as possible. So bootstrap it as long as possible. Now, this is not something that's usually done for that long in more developed ecosystems. You usually have idea stage funding, grants, a couple other things modalities available. But that also means that the challenges are more, maybe the timeline could be more, but there is an opportunity to create and solve problems that would and can scale across all emerging countries and across other developed countries as well.
So would you say Bangalore is a good place to bootstrap a company?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there is access to talent. You have all the mentorship you would need and a great ecosystem in terms of corporate accelerators, in terms of actual incubators, accelerators, venture funds. So yeah, it's a great place to actually be and be based out of for a startup in India.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Yushi. We hear later more when we have the panel conversation. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
That brings us to the next city. Now we look into Jakarta. And again, a short introduction video to the Jakarta startup ecosystem by my colleague, our country director, Daniel from Jakarta.
Hello from Jakarta, home to more than 10 million citizens with a metropolitan area of more than 40 million people. Jakarta is the capital of Indonesia, home to some of the most famous startups and unicorns in the region. Indonesia is also the largest country in Southeast Asia, a land of opportunities. As an ambassador for Asia Berlin and as a mentor for the German Accelerator, I hope you see the same opportunities as me, and I'd like to welcome you to the region.
So Jakarta startup ecosystem scores of 43 out of 100 in our startup friendliness index. So Jakarta is fascinating. It has a huge market. It has more than 17,000 islands, which is quite unique. And what I learned from the Indonesian ambassador here in Berlin is actually, if you take the map, the size of Jakarta and put it on Europe, it is essentially across Europe. And if you put it on the United States, it's across the complete United States. So that's something that we often forget, actually, what of a big country Indonesia is, and that essentially gives also benefits and the potential to create solutions that are specifically targeted at these challenges. So if you look at Jakarta, Jakarta sticks out with affordable talent, skilled worker, and from a startup perspective, it is quite affordable to get them on board as team members, as employees. Then Jakarta is host of the 5 unicorns that Indonesia has, as we heard by Daniel. And it has a growing fintech scene, which is essentially derived out of these conditions, that there's a big population, partly underbanked, spread across islands, and so fintech is a sector that popped up with solutions. And therefore, I'm really glad to have here Arya, the director of Amarta. And essentially, Amarta is one of the successful startups in that field. It's one of the largest peer-to-peer lending businesses. So, Arya, tell us a bit more about Amarta.
Hi, Jan. Yes, Amarta is basically a financial technology company, fintech. We are operating as micro lenders, meaning that our presence, the reason why we exist, is because, as you mentioned earlier, that we have many populations underbanked or even unbanked among the 268 million people in Indonesia. I think only half of them have been served by banks or formal financial institutions, and that's why Amarta as a financial technology comes into scene to provide a solution for those micro entrepreneurs, especially those living in rural areas, to get affordable digital financial services. So yeah, we exist from a big problems that Indonesia has. Yes, we do have a huge market, 268 million. And in Jakarta alone, we have more than 10 million people. But the problem's also big. And in terms of financial access, it's even bigger. So that's why that's the main purpose, the reason why Amarta exists.
Yeah, I mean, we've been to Jakarta with the Asia Berlin delegation trips quite a few times, and Arya is also Asia Berlin ambassador. And I do remember it's a beautiful place, and also like really amazing entrepreneurs that we met there. But one experience that stuck with me also is stuck in traffic. So I think it's part of the experience to spend some time in traffic. And then I had one remarkable realization, and that was there. Once we were in a hotel to the city center, and out of a sudden it was quiet, and then I heard music, and and people talking, and I'm very like uncommon experience, and it was like the car-free day or mornings, as I remember. So infrastructure-wise, I would say Jakarta has quite some challenges. Does that have an impact on entrepreneurs, Arya?
Yes, you pointed out the right problems in Jakarta. We do have huge problems in terms of physical infrastructures, especially the related to transportations. We still see traffic jams and air pollutions, which reduces the quality of living in Jakarta. And I think that's part of the reasons why people prefer to stay in Bali probably instead of Jakarta. But despite the physical challenges in terms of infrastructures like roads and transportations, I think one of the challenges for startups or for entrepreneurs in Jakarta is that non-physical infrastructure, such as the related to taxation, for example, like fiscals, and also some legal related matters, which has been improved in the past years through the enactions of a new law that promotes entrepreneurial spirits and ease of doing business in Indonesia. But yes, physical infrastructures like traffic jams, air pollution are still quite bothering for startups to operate in Jakarta.
Well, I'm thinking startups are innovative solutions per se, and so I think startups should provide and create some of the solutions to these challenges in the infrastructure.
Exactly. That's the problem/opportunity. So yes, exactly.
Yes, and we're working on it. There's a project called Smart Change, where we collaborating with the Berlin Senate and the city of Jakarta, the Smart City Department, and essentially the ambition here is to create solutions for sustainable cities.
Looking forward to have it on work. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We speak later during the panel. I'm looking forward to hear more from you.
Sure.
All right, so that means we are now going to our third city, Singapore. Well, Singapore is known as a startup ecosystem. I would say it scores a 66 out of 100, which is ranking from the 58 cities that we measured on position number 2. So somehow Singapore, and especially the state, I have to say here, did an excellent job, right? Because the conditions are not necessarily great. It's a very small population. It's a small space geographically, extensive costs of living. So kind of the circumstances are not necessarily the best, but you can make a strength out of that. And that's what the state of Singapore did, pushed entrepreneurship as one of the key driving forces of the economy. And so, meanwhile, Singapore became a hub for quite mature startups with a strong focus on deep tech, a strong focus on industries, industry innovation, and therefore also like the second tier of startups, and that's the B2B startups. So what we see in Singapore is stronger B2B startups than consumers, which is not surprising as the market in Singapore is not that big. But if you build a startup and a company in Singapore, you build it for the region and you use Singapore as a hub. Beside the things that are going very well, also Singapore has its challenges. So we looked into the entrepreneurial culture here, and some of the indicators appear to give a glimpse on challenges that appear here. And this is, for example, the indicator on entrepreneurship intention. It scores an 8 out of 100, as well as entrepreneurship as a career path, where Singapore scores a 42, which sounds okay, but in contrast to Jakarta, which scores a 73, and Bengaluru, which has scores 100, there is not that strong of an entrepreneurial drive, which can be explained through opportunity costs, right? To start a venture, to start a startup with low salaries, a lot of uncertainties, in contrast to getting a probably well-paid job in the corporates or in politics in Singapore, is to younger people maybe more appealing. So let's. I'm very honored to have from Singapore Akshay. He's a partner at Lightspeed Venture Partners. So now a bit of an investor's perspective. Akshay, tell us a bit about Lightspeed Venture.
Yeah, thanks, Jan. Lightspeed is a global venture capital fund. We invest in startups across the world. So present in the US, and then besides that, have been investing in markets like China and India since the mid 2000s. And incidentally, actually, Southeast Asia and Singapore is our newest office, which we opened in early 2020. A lot of the reason why we decided to open an office in the region was that we just saw a lot of interesting innovation happening in markets like Singapore, especially on the B2B side, where we saw a lot of our enterprise software companies globally setting up their regional headquarters in the region. And so, by extension, started making investments in the region and haven't looked back since.
And what are the innovation trends that you can see? What are the startup trends that you can observe here?
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say that I've seen broadly 3 buckets of innovation coming out of Singapore. I think one, which Jan, I think you alluded to, was Singapore really is sort of the regional hub into a lot of the economies like Indonesia or Vietnam, as some of the interesting markets in Southeast Asia. And so I think we've invested in companies like that. Grab is an example of one of our early investments in the region, which is Singapore headquartered. And the reason why Singapore ends up being a great hub from that perspective is because of the infrastructure, and because of the global nature of the city. It's able to attract a lot of high quality talent, which helps these companies scale. And so, yeah, I would say that's one class of companies, really, which are just Singapore headquartered. Um, and then I'd say the second is, companies which are, they start in Singapore, but they're really building for a global market. So a lot of these would be, enterprise software companies. They're able to really take off in Singapore because, Singapore is it's the Asia hub for a lot of multinational corporations. It's the regional hub for a lot of the domestic corporations in the region. And so it's a great ground for an entrepreneur to test their B2B product, get early customers, and actually use those customers to scale across the world. So I'd say that's sort of been the second interesting bucket of companies. And then the third, which I'd say still early but very promising, is this whole area around deep tech or IP driven startups. And so we're starting to see a lot of interesting entrepreneurs build in very interesting areas such as space or satellite tech, lab grown food, right? Robotics, very like IP heavy industries. And so that's sort of another exciting area which we just don't see in a lot of the other ecosystems we invest in, maybe other than Israel.
Understand. Well, actually, thank you so much. We speak later in the panel a bit more.
Thank you.
Now we get some insights to Singapore through a short introduction of the Singapore startup ecosystem by our partners from REDHILL.
Singapore is really thriving. As one of the world's leading startup ecosystems, there are abundant of opportunities for incubation and venture activities. Based on the Startup Friendliness Index by enpact, Singapore is the world leader. Its excellent score is mainly driven by its global connectivity, infrastructure, as well as strong efforts to encourage and invest in entrepreneurship.
So now our fourth interview partner is Teresa, Program Director at the German Accelerator Asia, and she's responsible for market access. Now, Teresa is here because we also wanted to have someone that gives a perspective on the bridging of ecosystems. But first, before we kick off on that side, Teresa, tell us a bit about the German Accelerator Asia.
Great. Hi, Jan. Thank you for having me today. My name is Teresa. As you mentioned, I'm the Asia Program Director for our Market Access Program. This is a program that is run by German Entrepreneurship and is proudly financed by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy. So what we do is we take high potential startups from Germany on a fast-paced expansion journey into the world's leading innovation hubs in the US as well as Asia. So in Asia, we specifically offer a market access program out of Singapore, and we help them first validate the potential market, and we have market discovery programs also in South Korea, Japan, and India. What's great for these startups is that they're German startups looking to expand, but we don't take any equity, and our programs are free of charge with the exception of our market discovery programs in Asia. So yeah, I'm very excited to be here.
So Teresa, what can you tell us about innovation trends, industry trends that you have experienced with those startups then entering the markets?
Yeah, so since 2012, German Accelerator has nurtured over 290 startups, including close to 90 of them in Asia. And we've seen some really cutting edge solutions across multiple industries. Particularly in Southeast Asia, I would say the emerging sectors that are a good fit between Germany and Southeast Asia would be in health tech, smart city, fintech, logistics tech, and anything related to Industry 4.0. So some of our startups have brought their solutions to address these challenges in the sectors in the region, and they've gained some successes in the region. For example, we had a medtech startup last year called Apocular. They're a leader in hollow medicine, so a new imaging technology using mixed and augmented reality. And through our program, we help them negotiate a partnership with NUHS in Singapore, the National University Hospital of Singapore, and also a global distribution agreement with Ingram Micro for global distribution of their products. So,
Teresa, what does it need if I'm a German startup and I'm considering to scale towards Asia? What would you recommend? When am I ready? What do I have to do beside, of course, joining the German Accelerator?
So we look at a number of things. I think number one is making sure that you have some traction and a product market fit already in your home market. This is what we look for, that there is customers that you are solving a problem for. And if you have a strong enough proposition in your home market and you're looking to scale internationally, then we will work with you through our programs, either in the US or in Germany or in Southeast Asia, to see whether that is also a good fit in the region. And through that, we look at your value proposition, we match you with key customers, and see whether, your product can fly in Southeast Asia. And this is what we do.
And do you see, like, from the startups that you accompanied and that you supported? I assume not everyone was successful, but do you what is the distinguishing factor of being successful? And yeah.
I think we all talk about hyper-localization, and that's something that's really key. So although German and European companies are very keen to expanding into a dynamic and very large region, the common trend we see is that what works in their home country doesn't mean it necessarily works in Southeast Asia. And that's where we come in. So we help them refine their understanding and approach to the market, and we help them with these key connections that push them in the right direction so that their value proposition is fitted for the local markets.
Understand. Great, Teresa. I would open now the panel actually and get here in also again Ayushi, Akshay, and Arya. So, question to all of you: what are the main innovation drivers if you look into the ecosystem you are based in, from your perspective here? And maybe Ayushi, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I think India has some very unique challenges, like in terms of obviously the population and trying to service like a huge population. So initially, like the first level of startups started with addressing and leveraging the sheer number of people. But I think like what's evolving now is solving India's problems, but in a more deep tech way, and which can also transcend the boundaries. So for example, like breaking the silos is like to a large degree what is driving innovation now in India. Like you're going beyond like using the tech that existed to solve uniquely Indian problems. For example, even us, like we're using deep learning, computer vision, AI, drones to be able to like bring together something that is like unique to Indian problems in terms of like, you know, just the scale of it. And of course, like it can work just as well for other countries, but yeah, it started here in India.
And looking at those challenges and also like the country size, population size, Arya, that's kind of, there are some similarities, and
yeah.
How do you see that from a Jakarta Indonesian perspective?
Yes, I think the main drivers for entrepreneurs in Indonesia, given our populations, means big problems as well. The drivers should be the critical thinking to see problems as opportunity, like you said earlier. For example, during the pandemic, in terms of financial sectors, we see many customers in Indonesia are still offline, meaning that they do face-to-face transactions using cash, for example. During the pandemic, 2020, we see a huge transformation. We see a huge adoption rate of non-cash transactions. And that's where the fintech scene emerged. We see those innovating financial sectors during the pandemic, they see a significant growth despite the slowing, like the economy as a macro is slowing down, the consumer spendings are diminishing, but the financial sectors who offers technology to solve problems, to interact, and to do transactions online, see significant progress. Even in e-commerce, we see a huge demand spike on online transactions, which is also gives opportunity for on-demand logistical company to support this growing demand in e-commerce. So I would say that if we could critically see problems, whatever it is, as an opportunity, then it will drive us to innovate better.
Well, so Akshay, I mean, Singapore, looking at Singapore, the societal challenges are in that respect not so big. And so what are the innovation drivers there then? You mentioned already a few, but like what, like, and the government is pushing strong for deep tech innovation as well, coming from a research focus. But is that the only innovation input, or where do you see most innovation coming from?
Yeah, I think the biggest one for Singapore is really around capital. It's sort of the capital, the hub, financial hub, not just for Southeast Asia, but in many cases for Greater Asia as well. By extension, if you have a lot of capital here, most of the entrepreneurs, end up figuring out how to have some form of Singapore presence. And that hasn't happened by accident. A lot of that has been, even the government here being very proactive in terms of, anchoring various venture funds very early on, right? And then, I'd say like just since we've just gone through the pandemic, or still going through, and I think. Another thing which I'm starting to see is actually more concentration of capital in Singapore. A lot of funds moving from some of the other regions, such as Hong Kong, into Singapore as well. And so, yeah, I'd say like capital is really king in many ways, right? So I'd say that's been sort of the main area. Second is I touched upon this a little bit, but it is a global hub for talent as well, which is the raw material for any startup ecosystem. And so it's been interesting to just see the quality of talent you can find here. And actually, even if you look at startups in some of our portfolios in India or in Indonesia, a lot of them have actually offices in Singapore as well, just to sort of attract and retain like high quality talent. So yeah, I'd say those are the broadly the two main areas.
Is that also why we then see like a lot of companies are incorporated in Singapore and maybe have an office or their headquarters in Singapore, but then actually operating in other countries, in other regions? And I think, Teresa, also like the German Accelerator model is kind of like you chose Singapore as the hub, but essentially the startups that are joining the program are not targeting Singapore as a market, right?
I would say not all of them target Singapore, but it depends on the industry. So for fintech, I would say, and B2B startups, Singapore is definitely a hub for them. So I think, German Accelerator chose Singapore as a hub because it gives us access to the rest of the region. So again, as you had mentioned before, the availability of talent, access and travel, and the ease of doing business in Singapore is the best.
I could just add one point which I didn't mention is one of the reasons why a lot of companies set up in Singapore as well is because of the strong legal jurisdiction, the quality of the enforceability of a global law. And so that's actually another reason why you find a lot of investors here, but why a lot of companies set up their headquarters in Singapore, right? So it's because it's just an attractive jurisdiction for all stakeholders.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just cut off the sound for a second. So now a question to all of you. In your perspective, what is the next big thing? What is the next innovation driver in a sentence? Who wants to go first?
I think in Singapore, it would be, as you mentioned, it because of the limited space and resources here. I think for Singapore, it would be both renewable energy and food tech. So 2 things.
Thank you, Teresa.
Yeah, I think from Jakarta, we'll see consolidations in the digital financial services provider. As now we can see many companies, even non-fintech companies, start offering financial service products. Unicorns also start offering financial services. So we will see a consolidations among the multiple players in the non-financial sectors, even to serve financial services in Indonesia.
I think personally and as a firm, we're very excited. And I don't think this is a Singapore specific big thing, but I think we're just seeing a redefinition of how people think about careers and sort of, so we've been very active in investing in companies which are really in the passion economy or the creator economy, where basically anybody can sort of monetize their personal passion or skill set. And I think it's just going to see a new renaissance in some sense come up.
Thank you. Thank you. So
I think, yeah, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Ayushi. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think like Teresa touched on it earlier, but I obviously have a huge vested interest in saying that emerging tech like AR, VR, and drones might be the next big thing. And of course, like some of the experiments that are happening on the Asia Pacific, like Asia side, are like very interesting in how the tech is being adapted like worldwide. So it's an interesting time to be.
All right. We will take some questions from the audience. So if you are in the chat, post your question there, and my colleagues will put them forward to me. And before we're getting there, we have a lightning round now. So that means I will ask a question, and it's always just one word or one number. So my first question is, out of 10, how would you rate your city as in their startup friendliness? 0,
6.5.
6.5. All right. Thank you. That's Bangalore. Who wants to go next?
10 for Singapore. 10 for Singapore.
A 10. Okay. Okay.
If it's 10 for Singapore, then Jakarta is 7.5.
Okay. We're competing.
That's 8 for Singapore.
8 for Singapore. Okay. You see, it is partly subjective, no? And then in a word, if you have to give your startup city scene, the startup scene in your city, one word, what would that be?
Dynamic for Jakarta.
Very good.
Yeah. Vibrant for Singapore.
Since vibrant is taken, I'll go for hardworking.
Yes, that's a good one. The entrepreneurial spirit is also a hardworking spirit. Yeah. Very good.
That's a global for Singapore.
Well, as a hub, that's a good description. Yeah. All right. In the last lightning round, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of innovation?
Doing crazy things.
Doing crazy things.
I'd say blood, sweat, and tears.
That's a good one. I actually think of breaking down the silos. Like tech has to be used for some sort of like, improving the human condition and like creating impact. Like for a longish period of time, we've been using like AI for maybe like increasing advertising and making it more targeted. Like there's so much more that can be done. So yeah, for me, it's like breaking silos and creating actual human impact.
Right.
Yeah. Same with, I agree on that line. It would be effecting change.
All right, so I see now here some questions are popping up from the audience, and this here is a good one because Arya touched already on the COVID aspects and how that changed, or they had an impact on innovation in fintech. So, how do you see the impact of COVID on entrepreneurship in the region?
Yes, I think the impact of COVID in Indonesia especially is that the reductions of funds availability to support the entrepreneurs to experiment their ideas or to take risk on experimenting things. So that's the direct impact of the pandemic, because people are cutting their research budget. Even universities, governments, they start cutting budgets during the pandemic. But I see also, even in my circle of friends, there are better spirits of doing bootstrapping, meaning that the pandemic doesn't stop the ideas to emerge, the enthusiasms of the entrepreneurs to solve problems and help other people. We see a lot of my friends experimenting ways to deliver goods, deliver medical supplies to remote areas in Indonesia, and setting up a startup or a company using their own money or the money they raise from fundraising apps or a portal. So I see that there are two sides of the pandemic. First, yes, it has a negative effect, especially on funding. But on the other side of the coin, we also see emerging enthusiasms and emerging creativity to navigate the problems, to circumnavigate the challenges that they face. So I would say that the pandemic doesn't stop the entrepreneurs to experiment their ideas and to help other people with their initiatives.
I guess, like in India, it depends heavily on the kind of startup you were running. Like, for example, for any kind of remote tech, we worked with command and control centers, and the adoption was much faster. Like, we do have states and like large enterprises who are our clients, and in terms of like just my sales ops expenses, like that was completely slashed. Everything was happening remotely, and in fact, like in terms of funding, also like we were funded by Action for COVID tracking, like by ACT grants by Lightspeed. So initially, like, the entire command and control center was then used by 7 states across India for contact tracing. And this, like, in a way, I don't think that scale of expansion would have been possible without the pandemic in place. And with the speed that it happened, and also the kind of problem solving that was done. So it did create, like, in an unfortunate kind of way, but it did create some opportunities for certain kinds of startups in particular arenas.
Yeah, so challenges are an opportunity for it opens up opportunities, right? And I think that's a lot what the startup spirit is about, to see problems, to tackle them, and to create solutions, and that in a fast, iterative way. We have some more questions, and this is related to what can, and goes to all the speakers, what can the governments do to support the development of startup ecosystems and a more beneficial environment for entrepreneurs?
Maybe I'll take that. So first of all, I think, like the German government, it has been very supportive in helping German startups go overseas. And I think equally, I can say for the Singapore government, Enterprise Singapore, and their innovation programs have also really helped local startups to think about going abroad with mentoring programs, but also international expansion programs. In addition, for foreign startups, I think what really helps is having the availability of visas to help foreign entrepreneurs stay in the region, and then also to hire in the region. I think that really helps with the availability of talent. And yeah, I think having local grants, especially right now during these COVID times where capital may be a little bit more scarce, this has really helped a lot of the startups that we've seen on the ground as well. So.
Yeah. maybe to add here, I mean, we as enpact also supported a bit on that side. So in Indonesia, we rolled out an empowering entrepreneurship initiative and supported more than 100 startups to go through the crisis, to adjust. And again, a German government supported. Which leads me to my last question, and that's related to food tech as mentioned as the next big thing in Singapore. So have you seen any foreign companies solving the food scarcity issue in the region through food tech innovation?
Yeah,
Go ahead, actually. I mean, yeah, go ahead. Actually, I can also speak after you.
Sure. No, sure. I think it's quite interesting. We have Grab, which is on the which has a food tech direct to consumer food tech service, and so we did see a big spike, given the lockdowns early on around consumers, really adopting food tech, food delivery. But I'd say the more interesting example would be, we have a company called Ula, which is a B2B commerce marketplace in Indonesia. And what they do is they basically connect the end retailer, like the warung, with a set of suppliers on the food side. And so, given a lot of the supply chain disruptions which happened because of COVID, a lot of these warungs started ordering digitally as a way to make sure they had enough inventory, because the typical offline suppliers they would work with just did not have enough inventory, or had major logistics challenges because of the various lockdowns. And so that's probably another example. We saw that company saw demand spike by almost 2 to 3x, literally overnight. So yeah, I think those are probably a couple of examples on the food side.
Yeah, I think on our side in Singapore, some people might know, there's a 30 by 30 vision where the Singapore Food Agency has set a target of producing 30% of Singapore's food needs by 2030. So one of our German Accelerator alumni called Ever actually jumped on this bandwagon. They are a indoor vertical farm company, and they're setting up a global R&D center in Singapore, and this is going to help contribute to that. I think also another one of our alumni is working on plant-based proteins, and they have also secured funding from Temasek, which is the sovereign fund of Singapore. So yeah, I think those are two foreign startups that we are aware of that are helping to support this 30 by 30 vision for food tech.
I think in the Indian ecosystem, you obviously have the hydroponics, you have startups which are focusing on the quality of food and the supply chain of food. But for example, we also worked a little bit on precision agriculture, just predicting the plant diseases that exist with drone-based mapping and data. So there's a lot of effort that's going in on each part of the entire chain by corporates and startups alike. I know that Reliance is working heavily on the agriculture side as well for creating a digital infrastructure.
Yeah, and I think I will add from Indonesia's perspective, since we are so fragmented, we have 17,000 islands, so the distributions of staple foods becomes a challenge. So there are many startups are now experimenting alternative foods for the future. So instead of eating rice, we will be introduced with the alternative foods in the future. It has sufficient nutrition and diet, but can be produced in a more sustainable ways instead of just enlarging the farm fields or the agriculture's supplies. So we've seen this as an experimental things at the moment, but I see this is a good initiative because food scarcity is imminent. It will happen sometimes in the future. So innovation in these sectors are very critical and needs significant support.
So thank you so much to our valuable insights and contributions. And there are many more questions from the audience, and please stay with us because you can ask the speakers directly in the breakout rooms later. So stay with us and you can post all your questions. Now, we're coming to the next part of our event today, and it's a great pleasure for me because we talked about the insights that we have in numbers as well as in stories from Singapore, Jakarta, and Bangalore. And I'm proud to present that the launch of our first edition of Empower, which is our magazine giving insights on the entrepreneurial ecosystems and the innovation trends in those 3 cities. This is done with the collaboration of the Berlin Senate and Asia Berlin, and our partners from REDHILL. So very excited. We have a physical copy here, as you can see, but there is a digital version that you can download if you go to www.enpact.org. And download your version there and give us your feedback. We are very much looking forward to that. So now we are almost at the end. Now it's about getting ready for the breakout rooms where you can interact with the speakers and post your questions. And grab a coffee, a tea, or a glass of water, and see you in the breakout rooms in a second.
Hello everybody, this is a quick intro how breakout rooms work and how to operate them. So the moment where the breakout rooms become active, I can see this button down here, breakout rooms. I click that button and I see the different rooms. Now I can join in this room, which brings me to the room 1. In here I can now do 2 different things. One is I can leave the room and either leave the entire meeting or just leave the breakout room and go back to the main room. Or I can actually go to a different breakout room by clicking on this button. The main room will always be a tech support room, so if you have a question how to operate the breakout rooms, you can return back to the main room and get your answer from the moderator.
Friends, it's time to say goodbye. I hope you enjoyed the event. We are back on Potsdamer Platz, just walking distance away from the enpact office. And tune in to our next Asia Berlin event and visit us in beautiful Berlin. Hope to see you soon. Bye.